and finally graduated. I was over 21 and paying tuition before I graduated. I lost that much time. Maybe I even stayed on extra long because being with a band, it was difficult to work everything in. Because I remember many times we had some distance to go to a one-night shot somewhere. The guys I'd go out when school was out, which was about 3 o'clock or so, and here's the band bus waiting out there for me. With all the guys in it, and then we'd take off. But it was fun, a fun part of my life. I liked it. I had girls, as most guys do, and it was a joyous part of my life. I don't know what else I can tell you.
Well, were you, when you're going to school that late, did you get harassed by the other guys, or did that happen? Or?
No, I didn't get harassed. Nobody harassed me. Oh, wait a minute. Yeah, one teacher did. But I'll tell you about that in a minute. But what I did get, they thought I was the old man. See, I was the old man in the class. Because they're 16 and 17. I had to do part of my senior year and part of the junior year and the senior year. That's what I had left to do. And so they were 15, 16, and I'm 21. So you can see why they felt I was an old man. But anyhow, I got along well with them and everything else. They weren't razzing me or anything. Most of them knew what happened. They would ask, and the story would get around. Well, he got kicked out of school for a year or something like that. So anyhow, I was going to tell you about the teacher that did give me some problem. She was Mrs. Finch. It's amazing I can remember these names. They say in old age, it's things right yesterday you can't remember, but the old stuff you can remember. They're right. That's exactly what it is. Don't ask me what I had to eat last night. I couldn't tell you. But anyhow, she was teaching English literature. And we were studying Byron, I remember, Los Miserables. No, that's Victor Hugo. El Allegro and El Penseroso. Do you remember his two things? And we had to memorize those, among other things. But anyhow, the reason I bring that up is El Allegro particularly, is that we were about to study Allegro. She was introducing that, and she knew that I was a musician because, in fact, everybody knew I was a musician. I was a pretty popular guy around there because I was flying, and I was a musician, see, and older. So I had a lot of advantages. So anyhow, she took a dislike to me. I don't know why. I did my work and everything else, but she needled me. Maybe because I was older, you know. She probably thought I was a renegade, and she's going to show you she wasn't going to have a renegade in her place, you know. So anyhow, the question came up. She asked El Allegro. She says, "Victor, you're a musician. What does El Allegro mean?" And she's been needled me now, making me look like a fool for quite a long time. But I'm determined to get out of school, so I'm putting up with it, see. And I didn't know El Allegro. When you say brightly or something in dance music, you put brightly on there. You don't say Allegro. It's only in the classics that you use the old Latin terms. So I had to say, "I'm sorry, I don't know what it means." And so then she started saying, "Victor, how does that happen?" And she started reading me off in front of the class, And I stood up, and I gave her a retort. And I can't remember what I said. In fact, I don't know whether I remember what I said after I walked out the door, but it flowed out of me, And I grabbed my books and started to walk out, and the people kids clapped. Can you believe that? They clapped when I walked out that door. And I went down, Marshall was down there at the time, and he said, well, he says, the best thing for you to do is just stay out of the class for the balance of the year, and we'll try and work on another credit in, I had another, well, I had English to do, would be hung over. There'd be one credit hung over that I couldn't get through as a full day thing. So I'd have to come in once a day. He says, well, maybe we can put that on so you come in for 2 periods a day. And I said, that's great. Following semester, which I did. But I got my comeuppance on Mrs. Finch. This was delightful to talk about. After she'd given me this hard time and everything else. Well, one night I had a date, and I was with some friends, and we went to a nightclub over in Rock Island, Illinois. And so who's in there but Mrs. Finch with somebody? And I said, and I walked up, and I said, well, hello, Mrs. Finch. What a surprise to see you here. And I made a few other remarks that I can't remember. I said, geez, what the kids are going to love to hear about this. Boy, that gave me a lot of delight. Because she couldn't get back to me. I was already walked out of her class, you know. So anyhow, that's so much for high school. I don't know whether, there's lots of other things I could tell you, I suppose, if I could think of them. But I'd have to dig pretty deep to find any more. Those come off the top of my head.
Well, then talk about how, well, you mentioned you were in the orchestra, or the school orchestra?
Yeah.
And then you had your own band on the side?
No, I didn't have a band. Emil Flint was a musician. Emil Flint had had bands around the Tri-City areas for quite a few years. And in the meantime, I started with in Rock Island, Illinois, at a roller skating rink, in a little band that my cousin Bill Anthony played piano in, and it consisted of a trombone, trumpet, 2 brothers, and Roy Winters on drums, the Lear brothers, and Roy Winters on drum and Bill on piano. And so they decided they wanted the banjo, so that's where I started, playing banjo in this roller skating rink. And it's a good thing the roller skating rink made so much noise they couldn't hear what we were playing anyhow, so it didn't matter how bad we were. But anyhow, we cut our eye teeth on there. And then later we decided that we wanted to have a band. That was during the summer. The roller skating rink was in a big tent. So then we decided we wanted to keep on playing, and we couldn't get jobs. We didn't know anything about it. But we heard that Emil Flint at the moment didn't have a band. So we called to see if he would audition us. And so we went over there and we auditioned in his garage. And he liked what he heard, I guess, because here he had a nucleus of young bands, you know, and we, during the summer, we had learned something about music, you know. Well, thanks a lot.
Should we just leave it?
We just leave it. And so we started with Flint. We added more men, and we started with Emil. When we first started, we had 2 trumpets. We had a trumpet and trombone, 2 saxophones, alto and tenor sax, and Roy on drums, and me on banjo, and Bill on piano. And we didn't have a bass. And that was about the size of our band, which was small. But anyhow, we got some nice jobs, and we played at Iowa City fraternities and so forth. We really, and I started writing arrangements. And so we grew from there.
What did Emil Flint do then?
He was a front man. He played violin, but badly, and seldom, thank goodness. But he was a good manager, and he had a big smile. He's a good-looking man. You know, he had all white hair, and when he smiled, the whole place glowed, you know. He had that kind of personality. And he was a nice guy to work with. I think we got jazzed out of some of our funds from time to time, and because we didn't know anything about what he got.
Right.
We just know what we got. And sometimes we figured he got paid a lot more than, and we should have been paid a lot more. But we didn't rebel because he was our savior.
Right.
So
what did that mean to be the front man? You mean he was just the manager?
the leader. Well, he was a manager. He was everything. He ran the show. He booked the band.
He directed you as you played?
Yeah, he was in front. A front man means on the in front, and that's, you know, handling the people, talking to the people, getting he's the window dressing, and we're putting out the music. And also, he did everything. He did the booking, and he furnished the transportation. That's another story, the transportation we had. You haven't got enough tape in that great big box in there for things if I really get started, I'll tell you. But
Well, give us a tidbit or two.
what?
Give us a tidbit or two. Give me a tidbit or two of what a story of your transportation.
Oh, transportation? Well, it first started out, we had these automobiles that I'm going to mention, you don't even know them. They're so old. Like Studebaker. You recall the Studebaker?
Well, I've heard
That
of it,
there
yeah.
was a Studebaker? Well, they used to make a big car. It was a 7-passenger sedan. So when it first started out, we started out with a 7-passenger sedan Studebaker. And they had running boards on them, on the sides. You know what running boards are?
Yeah.
You step up things to go into the car on both sides. And so we got into the Studebaker on this side, and on this side, on the outside, hung all of our instruments, tied on to the side outside of the car. So we go down the street, there's a great big bulge of instruments all tied like this onto the side of the car. It looked a mess, but anyhow, we got there and got back. Sometimes we ran into a little problem, but anyhow, then he had a brilliant idea. Emil had a lot of brilliant ideas, and he followed through on them, thank goodness. He bought a delivery truck. It was a closed-in truck, you know. And he had a helper, Frank Roller, who was a pretty good mechanic and pretty good with his hands and everything. So they cut off the front, engine compartment, so that the driver's compartment with the windshield right here and the seat where he sits on, and then it went in at the bottom. Just there was no motor, no nothing. But he put a hitch on the front so they could hitch it behind the Studebaker. So it was a trailer. It became a trailer, just that part. So 3 guys could sit in that seat, a little crowded, of course, and all the instruments were in the truck behind, you know, in that part of it. And we pulled that around for a while. we had some close calls. Fran Lear, Emil usually drove, but then Fran Lear wanted to drive. And so Emil broke him in on it. It was tough to drive that thing at night. Those roads were narrow. They were just this way, and much narrow. Our cars were narrow too, of course. But the narrow, I don't know what they are, 9 feet, 10 feet across, wide. At that time, they were about 6 or 7 feet wide. So boy, you had to watch where you're driving. And they weren't lined. There was no line in the middle. A painted line, divider lane, nothing. You just guessed how far over you were. So it was a tough, mad thing to do. And but anyhow, Frank, Emil taught Fran Lear to drive, and so we're leaving a town. We had played our job in a town up in Illinois. I can't remember the name of the town. But anyhow, in going out of town, you were kind of up on a bluff, and then there was a steep hill down like this, and down below there was a railroad yard. And we'd drive along that railroad yard, and then we would come to a turn, and we'd go down this hill and across the bridge over the railroad yard, see? Well, Fran turned too soon. And he get on this road, and down this hill we go. It's 45 degrees. Into the railroad yards and over the railroad tracks. threw everything out of the car. Oh, it was a mess. Fortunately, it didn't do too much damage to the car. There must have been some boards or something between those tracks, because otherwise it would have torn that car to pieces, you know. But we managed to get turned around and get back up, out of there again, alive, in one piece, and get home. But I got a load of stories. I can't tell them all. But
was he towing that truck?
yes, that truck was behind. Can you imagine what those three guys in the back were thinking? And the thing is that you got to remember is in those days that was before safety glass. This is window pane glass I'm talking about. Boy, if one of those shattered, you're cut to pieces.
Yeah.
Boy, I ought to tell you, we lived a risky life. But anyhow, carry on. Soon our band got larger, and the accommodations were too skimpy. We had more instruments. We got more instruments. Roy Winters, for instance, got a vibraphone and things like that, and so there was no room. So Emil came up with another idea. He got a Studebaker coupe. It was a 4-passenger coupe, I think, with a little jump seat, and it had the back like that, you know, that you lift up in the back. So Emil came up with a fifth-wheeler type of an idea. He would put a thing in the back of the Studebaker like that, and then you'd bring the tongue up and put it in there, and then go down like that, and here was your trailer back there. And it was windows all the way around the thing, and our enough room we could put a card table in with all the seating area up in the front. Then over the wheels were the places where all the band instruments were, and then a narrow lane through that to back, so there was a seat clear across the back. So, excuse me. So there was enough room for all of us. I mean, with the car and everything else, we had plenty of room. And we used to sit there and play cards and that thing with a card table, you know, penny ante, poker, things like that. And I would write arrangements on the way. Keep myself busy. I didn't care much for poker. Well, I liked poker, but it got old when you did it all the time. So I would write arrangements. And I had a kind of a knack that I studied doing it. Originally, when I started arranging, I had to try the piano and check it out. But after a while, I was able to hear all these tunes in my head and know the notes I could put down. You know, God bless America. You know, I'd know the C down to B flat, so on. I knew that in my head, so I could write without a piano. And so I did a lot of that. And then we'd get to a town if we had some time left, which we often did, because we wanted to. Back in those days, you had to allow plenty of time because you're going to probably have a tire flat, or you're going to have your car blow up on you or something, which wasn't. Cars were not reliable back in those days. Weren't we talking about? Yeah, we were talking yesterday about the difference in things those days and today. Things are much, much more reliable than those days. And I can tell you a lot of breakdown stories too. But anyhow, we'd get to in about 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon, you know, and we'd find a pool hall. We'd go and play pool till lunch or dinner. And back in those days, you can get a full dinner with dessert for 50 cents. Full dinner, meat, potatoes. I don't know whether it's salad. Salads weren't as popular then as they are now, but possibly salad. And I don't think you got a drink. But you got a meat and potatoes and a vegetable and dessert for 50 cents. Isn't that great? Of course, in those days we were earning good money. as compared to most people. We made $7 a night, and we worked practically every night of the week. Seven, that's $49. That's almost $50 for a stinking musician. But we were doing pretty well. Roy Lear was the first one to get married. He was the trumpet player. And your grandmother and I were the second ones in the band to get married. And
so you guys were all pretty much the same age? Everyone in the
oh yeah, we were. We were all about the same age. And
it started. How old were you when you went to Emil Flint?
Emil Flint, let's see, I'd say, I think we went with him in 29. I was 17. Yeah. And I stayed in the band business and with Emil the whole time until 1936, when I quit the band and started looking for a photo job, of which there weren't any.
Right.
But that's another story.
So from the time you were 17 to about the time you were 24, you
Yeah.
were just in the band.
I was in the band, yeah. And the last 4 years, in 1934, 2 years before I quit the band, I decided that I wanted to leave the band and get into something else for a couple of reasons. First of all, I was now married, and we had Joanne was born, and we lived in a stinky little one-room apartment with a roll-down bed, and things like that. And I hated that because back in Davenport, where I come from, we lived in big houses, not big, but houses, where you had 6, 7 rooms. And here we are in this little thing, and looking out on the vacant lot next door was looking out on a lot of trash and everything. This was in Berwyn, Illinois. It's kind of a junky town, anyhow. And at least half of the guys lived in that same apartment building. The rest of them were dispersed between there, and some of the guys lived up in Oak Park, which was the next town north. And we moved from there, and we moved up to into Oak Park on Madison Avenue, and got a larger apartment over a Manny, Moe, and Jack automobile parts place. And that was the noisiest place anybody could ever want to live, because it was right on Madison Avenue, and this was before freeways, many years before freeways, when all of the traffic from west, from Iowa, from Oklahoma, and everybody else coming into Chicago comes in Madison Avenue. That along with the streetcars, all the trucks, I mean. So you hear these trucks, you hear streetcars, and when we first moved into that place, we didn't notice it so much in the daytime, but the first night we were there, boy, this noise out on the streets, going all the time, horns honking and everything, and down below we got this Pep Boys or whatever it was. That's Manny, Moe, and Jack, isn't it?
I think, yeah.
Something. And that was the day that the air horns first came out. You ever know what air horn is?
Yeah.
Boy, they make a racket. And so everybody come in the store, tested the one that was on the counter. And boy, you'd jump upstairs every time it went off at first. But the strange thing is, we weren't in there a week and we didn't hear anything anymore. We just got so used to it, in one ear and out the other. It's amazing. It was the only salvation we had, otherwise it had driven us up the wall. And we were living there when Joanne was born.